There's a 23-year-old somewhere right now spending $40 on brunch who will retire with less money than someone earning half their salary. Not because they're reckless. Not because they don't work hard. Because they don't understand what compound interest actually does when you're not looking. And here's the uncomfortable part. The difference between these two people isn't discipline or financial genius. It's just whether anyone ever showed them the math that changes everything. $300 a month sounds like nothing. It's less than most people spend on coffee and lunch. It won't change your life this year. Or next year. But somewhere between year 7 and year 30, something breaks. The numbers stop making intuitive sense. And by the time you're 50, you're sitting on wealth that didn't come from a promotion or inheritance or lucky break. It came from understanding one thing most people never actually calculate. If you want more breakdowns like this that actually show you the math instead of just telling you to save, hit subscribe. We're cutting through the noise on this channel, and there's a lot more coming. We're told to save for retirement the same way we're told to drink more water. Everyone agrees it's important. Nobody actually explains why it works. And when the explanation does come, it's usually from someone in a suit talking about index funds and expense ratios and something called a diversified portfolio that makes your eyes glaze over before you finish the sentence. So most people do one of two things. They save nothing because it feels pointless when rent exists. Or they save a little, check their account 6 months later, see basically the same number, and think this isn't working. Both reactions make sense. Because saving $1,500 in 6 months and seeing $1,500 in your account feels like you just moved money from one place to another. There's no magic.
No multiplicación.
Just slightly less spending money and a number that barely moved. What nobody tells you is that you're watching the least interesting part of the story. You're in the first act where nothing happens yet. And the entire system is designed around whether you're willing to sit through it. Because compound interest doesn't care about your feelings or your timeline or whether you understand it. It just runs in the background. Slowly at first. Then faster than you'd believe. Let's say you're 25. You start putting $300 a month into an index fund that tracks the S&P 500. Not a sexy individual stock. Not crypto. Not something your friend told you about. Just the boring broad market that's averaged around 10% annually for the last century. Year 1, you put in $3,600. The market goes up 10%. You end the year with about $4,000. Your gain? $400. That's it. You saved for 12 months and made less than one decent paycheck. Most people look at that and think, I'm doing this wrong. But here's what just happened that you can't see yet. That $400 you earned? It's now in the account. Which means in year 2, you're not just earning returns on the new money you add. You're earning returns on the returns. Year 2, you add another $3,600. Your account grows to roughly $8,800. You made about $800 this year. Still not life-changing. Still easy to dismiss. Year 5, you've put in $18,000 of your own money. Your account is worth nearly $23,000. You've made $5,000. And now something starts to happen. Year 10, you've contributed $36,000. Your account is worth over $61,000. You've made $25,000 without doing anything except continuing the same boring monthly deposit. That $25,000 came from nowhere. Not from working more hours. Not from a side hustle. From math that was running in the background while you lived your life. But you're still in the slow part. Year 20, total contributions, $72,000. Account value, nearly $228,000. You made $156,000. More than double what you physically put in. Your money has been quietly duplicating itself faster than you've been adding to it. And this is where it breaks. Year 30, you've put in $108,000 over 3 decades. Your account is now worth over $678,000. You made $570,000 just by not stopping. Here's the part that nobody warns you about. Somewhere around year 23, something strange happens. You stop being the main source of your account's growth. The returns you're earning every year become larger than the amount you're contributing. Think about that. You add $3,600. The market adds $40,000. You are no longer building your wealth. Your wealth is building itself. You've become a spectator to a process you set in motion years ago and almost forgot about. This is the inflection point. The moment when compound interest stops being a concept from a finance blog and becomes the most important financial force in your life. And almost nobody sees it coming because almost nobody makes it to year 23. They stop at year 3 because the numbers feel small. They stop at year 8 because they need the money for something else. They stop at year 15 because the market drops 20% and panic overrides patience. The system only works if you're still in it when it starts working. And that's the cruel joke of compound interest. The people who need it most are the ones least likely to wait for it. Because if you're living paycheck to paycheck, $300 a month feels impossible. And if you're comfortable, $300 a month feels irrelevant. It only makes sense in hindsight. Which is exactly when it's too late to start. Let's rewind and change one variable. Same person. Same $300 a month. Same market returns. But instead of starting at 25, they start at 35. 10 years later. Just a decade of delay. Maybe they were paying off loans. Maybe they were figuring life out. Maybe they just didn't think about it. By age 65, they'll have about $339,000. The person who started at 25? $678,000. Same effort. Same monthly deposit. A difference of $339,000. All because of 10 years. That's not a rounding error. That's a different retirement. And if you zoom in on those 10 years they missed, here's what's even more disturbing. They would have only contributed $36,000 during that time. $36,000 turned into $339,000 in foregone growth. That's the hidden tax of waiting. Every year you delay isn't just 1 year of contributions you miss. It's decades of compounding that never happens. Time is the multiplier. Money is just the input. And this creates a bizarre situation where a person earning $40,000 a year who starts at 23 can end up wealthier at retirement than someone earning $100,000 who starts at 37. Same monthly amount. Different starting line. Completely different outcome. Which raises an uncomfortable question. Why doesn't anyone teach this in school? Not the vague idea of saving. Not the motivational poster about compound interest being the eighth wonder of the world. The actual math. The year-by-year breakdown. The visual proof that waiting 5 years costs you 6 figures. Because if people actually saw this, the entire personal finance industry would look different. But there's a problem baked into all of this. Humans are very bad at valuing things that happen 30 years from now. We're wired to prioritize immediate rewards. The dopamine hit of buying something today versus the abstract concept of having more money in 2055. And $300 a month is just enough to hurt. It's not pocket change. It's dinner out twice a week. It's a streaming service and a gym membership and a decent bottle of wine. So every month, you're making a choice. Small pleasure now versus large wealth later. And the reason most people choose wrong isn't because they're irresponsible. It's because the large wealth later doesn't feel real. $600,000 at age 65 is a number. It's not a house you can see. It's not a car in your driveway. It's a spreadsheet projection that assumes the market behaves and you never stop and nothing catastrophic happens. And that assumption does a lot of heavy lifting. Because in those 30 years, the market will crash. Multiple times. You'll watch your account drop 20, 30, maybe 40% in a single year. And every instinct will tell you to pull out. To stop the bleeding. To move everything to cash until things stabilize. That instinct will cost you everything. Because the math only works if you stay in during the crashes. The recovery is where the compounding happens. Selling at the bottom doesn't protect you. It locks in the loss and eliminates the rebound. The people who end up with 600,000 aren't smarter. They're just more stubborn. Or more oblivious. Or more trusting of a process that feels broken in the moment. And that's the psychological tax nobody mentions. Compound interest doesn't just require money. It requires nerve. It requires watching your account lose $50,000 in a month and doing absolutely nothing. Most people can't do that. Not because they lack discipline. Because they lack context. They don't know that every major market crash in history has been followed by a recovery. They don't know that timing the market is statistically a losing strategy. They don't know that the worst thing you can do during a downturn is leave. So they leave. And they miss the part where it all comes back. Of course, there's an elephant in the room. $300 a month assumes you have $300 a month. And for a lot of people, that's not a choice between lattes and wealth. It's a choice between rent and wealth. The median rent in the US is over $1,700. The median income is under $60,000. After taxes, after rent, after food, after transportation, $300 might not exist. Which means this entire framework only works if you're already above a certain threshold. Not rich, but stable. Not struggling. Not choosing between savings and medication. And that's the dark edge of compound interest. It's the most powerful wealth-building tool available to regular people, but only if you're regular in the right way. If you're broke, it doesn't apply. If you're rich, you don't need it. It's a tool for the middle. For people who have just enough to sacrifice a little without catastrophe. And even then, it requires something most people don't have, certainty that nothing will go wrong for 30 years. No medical emergency that drains the account. No job loss that forces an early withdrawal. No family crisis that requires access to that money now, not in 2055. Compound interest is powerful. One early withdrawal at the wrong time can erase years of growth. Because when you pull money out, you're not just losing the amount you withdraw. You're losing all the future compounding that money would have generated. It's a system that punishes interruption. And life is made of interruptions, so what does this actually mean? It means that wealth, for most people, isn't built through talent or hustle or big risky bets. It's built through endurance. Through doing the boring thing for longer than feels reasonable. Through ignoring the noise and the crashes and the fear and the temptation to stop. The person who ends up with 600,000 at 65 isn't exceptional. They're just consistent. And consistency over decades is rarer than brilliance. But here's the strangest part. Once you understand this, you start seeing it everywhere. Not just in retirement accounts. In careers. In relationships. In skills. The thing that separates the top 1% from everyone else usually isn't a shortcut. It's just that they didn't quit in year 7 when it still looked like nothing was happening. Compound interest isn't just a financial principle. It's a model for how almost anything valuable gets built. Slowly. Then suddenly. And the people who win are the ones who survive the slowly part. But there's a question this raises that nobody really wants to answer. If the math is this clear, if the outcome is this predictable, If all it takes is $300 a month and 30 years of not stopping, why doesn't everyone do it? Is it lack of knowledge? Lack of access? Lack of discipline? Or is it something deeper? That we'd rather have the illusion of choice today than the guarantee of wealth tomorrow? That we'd rather spend than wait. Rather feel rich now than be rich later. And maybe that's not even wrong. Maybe living well in your 20s is worth more than having a bigger number in your 60s. But here's what nobody tells you when you're young. The choice isn't between fun now and wealth later. It's between small fun now and freedom later. Because $600,000 isn't just a retirement account. It's the ability to leave a job you hate. To take a year off. To help your kids. To not be afraid of getting old. It's options. And options feel a lot like wealth when you finally have them. $300 a month. $77 a week. $11 a day. That's the cost of opting into the most reliable wealth-building system ever created. Not a guarantee. Not a shortcut. Just a patient, indifferent mathematical process that turns small consistent actions into large irreversible outcomes. And the only question that matters is whether you're willing to do something boring for long enough to see it work. Because the math doesn't care if you believe it. It just runs. And 30 years from now, you'll either be looking at a number that changed your life, or wondering why you never started. The clock's already running. You just have to decide if you're still going to be in the room when the compounding finally kicks in.